Just thought we'd put together a handy little video to help you with measuring for your curtains. There are two basic measurements that we need, and it's really simple, but there's just a few things that are helpful to consider. The first thing is the width of your pole. So we've already got a pole up here. This is a window in our store. You can see that we've positioned the pole about halfway between the ceiling and the top of the recess, this area here. One of the most common things we see in the business is that curtain poles are often positioned too low, or curtain poles or tracks are often positioned too low, and it just brings down the whole ceiling and just doesn't make the curtains look as elegant as they might otherwise look. So in this case, about halfway, if your ceiling is really high and you've got a lot of space, then clearly you've got a lot of flexibility as to where you put your pole, but we'd recommend at least sort of 10-15 centimetres above the recess. So we've positioned the height of the pole. We've now got to think about the length of the pole. This one is positioned so that the finial is about 30 centimetres outside the recess. The more that you can put the pole to the outside, the more light you're going to get in, because what you don't want is to position the finial here so that the curtains sit here and block the light coming in through the window. You want to leave a good amount of space. The exact amount of space really depends on how big the window is. Clearly, the wider the window, the more space you're going to need to the side to fit in the curtains, because there'll be more widths of fabric in them. So here, this size of window, you'd generally be putting a pair of 1.5 curtains, and we've left about 30 centimetres. To calculate how wide we're going to make the curtains, we need the length of the track. And we are talking about the length here from inside finial to inside finial. This little bit on the end is what we call the finial. You can get lots of amazing styles and colours, and we've got lots of samples in the shop that we can show you. But it's the length from the inside finial to the inside finial, and that is the width that we need. The next question is how long to make your curtains, and that's something that is really quite a personal decision. It depends upon what you've got going on in the room. So here you can see we have a radiator. Always a bit of a pain that builders put radiators below windows, but unfortunately it happens frequently. Full-length curtains generally look more elegant, but we also understand the practicalities of life. So in this instance, you have to decide, are you going to run your curtains to sill level, in which case I would suggest stopping them below the sill but above the radiator. And clearly that avoids the heat being blocked in the winter when the curtains are closed. Visually on a window like this, full-length curtains would look much, much better. If you wanted to do that, you could maybe have some full-length curtains to the side and possibly consider a blind inside the recess as well, which would help. How long do you want your full-length curtains? Again, it's really up to you. A lot of people just want them to come down and meet the floor. Some customers like them to sit slightly above the floor, usually so that to avoid them getting too dirty. So they might sit them 1 or 2 centimetres above the floor. Other customers want them puddled on the floor, which means you might add anything between 10 and 20 centimetres to the length. So whichever length you decide to go for, whether it be sill, floor, puddled, you start your measurements where you want to finish and then measure up to the underside of the ring. So in this case, I'm measuring up. Take a few measurements along the pole to check that that everything is square. If it's not, you may want to contemplate taking either the longest if you want your curtains to sit on the floor, or possibly an average. If your pole's not up, there's a couple of options you've got. You can either give us measurements if you're then confident you can position the pole in the right place, or you can give us measurements that we can generate a quote for you from, and then you can put your pole up and just confirm a final drop before we make up. Just let us know whichever way works best for you. Depends how confident you are at fitting your poles or your tracks. If you're based near us, we can provide a full fitting service, but we do also send out curtains all over the country and indeed all over the world. So it's important that we get these measurements right. If you are having problems with measuring, we're here to help. There's a guide on our website. Use WhatsApp or Zoom quite regularly now for customers to help them decide on the fabric that they want, but also just to check that they're taking the measurements from the right place. But my key tips for measuring for curtains: make sure your pole sits high enough above the window, far enough outside the window, and that's just going to make your curtains and your room look as elegant as possible. Hope you find that of some help, but please do get in touch if you've got any more questions.